Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa afdalu salawati wa tammu taslim ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen Sayyidina wa Habibina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd, fa'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. فيقول الله عز وجل في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد: ألا إن أولياء الله لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. صدق الله العظيم وبلغنا رسوله النبي الأمين الكريم ونحن على ذلك لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. All praises are for Almighty Allah, the Lord, the Creator, the Sustainer, the Cherisher of the entire creation. Every single thing that Almighty Allah created, He sustains it. He provides for it. He keeps it alive. He looks after it. He protects it. Everything from the creation is not free from Almighty Allah, but Almighty Allah, the Creator, is free from the entire creation. He does not need the creation, but the creation needs Him. We are dependent upon our Creator, Almighty Allah, but He is not dependent on us. He is completely independent. He is completely self-sufficient. The great Almighty Allah, our Creator, He bestows greatness upon whomsoever He wills. And among those that He has bestowed greatness upon are those that are known as the Awliya. The Awliya. The word Awliya is an Arabic term which is plural. The singular is Wali. Wali means a friend. A friend of who? Waliullah, friend of Allah. So Awliyaullah means friends of Allah, the plural form. And in short we say Awliya, referring to Awliyaullah. A Wali is one who has attained that closeness to Almighty Allah. They were a Muslim and they remain a Muslim and they die as a Muslim. But being a Muslim is the first stage of gaining closeness to the Creator. When we read the Shahada and we become a Muslim, by believing in it and by reading it. When we read Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh, by reading this and believing in this, we become a Muslim. However, once we become a Muslim, then there are levels of closeness that we have to Almighty Allah. And from amongst the closest to Almighty Allah are the Awliya, the friends of Almighty Allah. Those that have the highest level of closeness to Almighty Allah are the prophets. Nobody from the entire creation can surpass the status and position of the prophets of Almighty Allah. There were approximately 124,000 prophets. Nobody from the creation can achieve greater position than them. These are those blessed personalities chosen by Almighty Allah from amongst the humans. And they were given the special gift of prophethood. The first prophet sent upon earth was Sayyiduna Adam alayhi salam. And the last and final prophet sent on earth was Sayyiduna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, meaning Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. 124,000 approximately. But now after them, the greatest are the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. known as Ashabun Nabi. The Sahaba, those that met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the state of Islam, or became a Muslim in the presence of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they are the greatest after the Prophets. Then their students, known as the Tabi'een, they are the greatest. Nobody can surpass them. No matter what position, no matter what worship is done, what knowledge is sought, what character is obtained, one cannot surpass their position. Then we have their followers, their students, known as the Atba'ut Tabi'een. They are the greatest. So we have, after the prophets and messengers, we have the companions, the Sahaba. Then we have the Tabi'un, their students. And then we have their students, Atba'ut Tabi'een. These three generations, they are the best. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, خير القرون قرني ثم الذين يلونهم ثم الذين يلونهم. The best of all the generations, of all the people, are my disciples, my students. Then their students, and then their students. These three generations are the best. The most pious, the most God-fearing, the most righteous, the most knowledgeable, the most wise. They are the most complete from amongst the Muslims. Nobody from the third category can surpass those of the second category. Likewise, none from the second category can surpass the people of the first category, meaning the Sahaba. Likewise, the greatest of the Sahaba cannot surpass the status of the lowest of the 124,000 prophets. Almighty Allah has given them special categories and special greatness. But after them, after the three generation known as the Salaf, As-Salaf al-Salihun, the pious predecessors, this generation after them, then we have the believers, we have the Muslims, and from amongst them, those that obtain the highest closeness to Almighty Allah are referred to as the Awliya, the friends of Allah. If we work hard, if we obtain that closeness, we can also come into this category of the Awliyaullah, a wali. The Quran mentions, ألا إن أولياء الله لا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. That beware, that verily the friends of Almighty Allah, they have no fear in them, nor do they grieve. They don't fear anybody except for Almighty Allah. No matter what the situation may be, no matter what the enemy may try to do, no matter what somebody tries to do, they have no fear whatsoever in them. They only fear the Creator, Almighty Allah. وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Nor do they grieve. When they will stand in front of Almighty Allah and their accountability will take place, they will not grieve and be sad about their life in the dunya, in the world, because they did the maximum that they could do. They did the best that they could do. So due to achieving that, they will not grieve on the day of judgment. And then Almighty Allah explains further. Who are they? Within the Quran, Almighty Allah explains, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. Those that are the friends of Almighty Allah, they are those that have two criterias. They must meet two criterias. If they meet those criterias, then they can be a waliullah. And if they don't, then they can never be a waliullah. They can refer to themselves with the label of being a wali, but in reality they are not a wali. But if they have these two requirements, then in reality they are a Waliullah. The first one, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, they are those that have Iman. They are those that have Iman. They have faith. They believe in Almighty Allah. They believe in everything Almighty Allah has told them to believe in. They believe in all of the prophets, all of the messengers, all of the scriptures, the day of judgment, predestination. They believe in the hellfire. They believe in the paradise. They believe in the day of accountability. They believe in the unseen, the angels, the jinns. All of these things that Almighty Allah has told us to believe in, they believe in them. And they have those beliefs that were taught by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They don't have beliefs that go astray. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that from amongst my nation, my ummah, سَتَفْتَرِقُ أُمَّتِي عَلَى 73 فِرْقَةٍ. My nation, those people that will say, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Muslim. Unfortunately, they will be divided into 73 groups, 73 sects. Each one saying, I am a Muslim, I am a Muslim. But they will have different beliefs. كُلُّهُمْ فِي النَّارِ إِلَّا فِرْقَةً وَاحِدَةً. All of them will be in the hellfire except for one. From those 73 groups within Islam, of those people calling themselves Muslims, 72 of them will be deviants. There will be those that went astray. They left the straight path. They started forming their own beliefs, their own practices, and they left that tradition which has been coming, and they left that which the Quran allows, or they've done that which Islam prohibits. Those individuals, they will fall into those 72 sects. But the one that will be saved, the one that will go to Jannah, to paradise, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, who are they? Ma ana alay wa ashabi. They are those upon which I am. Ma ana alayhi wa ashabi. They are those that will follow my way and the way of my students, my companions. And in the other hadith, the word was used, hiya al-jama'a. They will be the group, the jama'a. So both of these terms came together, and the word Ahlu Sunnati wal Jama'a was formed. The people of the Sunnah and the congregation. In short, Sunni. That became shortened. So a true Muslim is one who follows a saved sect known as the Ahlu Sunnati wal Jama'a. And this word was used by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this term. It was used by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the hadith mentioned in Ad-Durr al-Manthur, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, referring to the people that will be saved and whose faces will be full of light on the day of judgment, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, hum ahlu sunnati wal jama'a. They will be ahlu sunnati wal jama'a. So that term is used for those that are of the straight path, the true Muslims. Because we have many people that are artificial Muslims. But one who is a true Muslim, because we have people that say, I am a Muslim, but I reject the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the last prophet, which is the fundamental of the religion. So that person, unfortunately, is not a real Muslim, but an artificial one. We have products which are genuine. All these clothes you can see, Adidas, Nike, all these different brands. You have the original brands, but you also have the artificial ones, the fake ones. Fake Adidas, fake Nike, fake Gucci, fake. You're always going to have fake ones. The real one is Islam. real Islam. But then we have the artificial ones. People that are claiming to be Muslims, but in reality they are misguiding people. They are misleading people. And they have belief and their practices that go against Islam. So a waliullah, a friend of Allah, will be that person who is of that true path of the Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, a true Muslim. Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, a person saying I am a Sunni or I am from the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that literally means that I am a true Muslim. That path which is going back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the 1400 years, I am of that part. I am not of all these other sects and groups that have been formed. This is what it means. But not only that, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَكَانُوا يَتَّقُونَ. They are those that have taqwa. They have taqwa. This term in the Quran is used normally for two meanings. The word taqwa. When the word taqwa is used and after it Almighty Allah is mentioned, or the hellfire is mentioned, then it means to fear. When the Quran mentions, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu attaqullah, O you who believe, fear Allah. Likewise, when the Quran mentions, فَاتَّقُوا النَّارَ الَّتِي وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ, fear the hellfire, then it means fear. But at times, it doesn't mean fear. At times, it means to do righteous acts and to abstain from things. And when nothing has been used and the word taqwa has been used by itself, then it could mean either one who fears and one who abstains from things. Either meaning can be taken or both meanings can be taken. So a muttaqi, a person with taqwa, is that individual who truly fears Almighty Allah. He or she knows that Allah is watching, Allah is observing. Everything that I am doing is being written down by the angels. They are recording everything. Nobody may be observing me. My parents are not observing me. My elders are not observing me. My family are not observing me. No one is observing me. Therefore I can do this, I can do that. No. Allah is observing. Allah is watching. The awliya, the friends of Allah, they know this. They are conscious of this. They keep this in their mind and they live their lives with that fear. And with that fear of Almighty Allah, they abstain from everything that Almighty Allah has told them to abstain from. They do that which Allah has told them to do and abstain from that which Almighty Allah has told them to abstain from. But the Quran continues, لَهُمُ الْبُشْرَى فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ لَا تَبْدِيلَ لِكَلِمَاتِ اللَّهِ ذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. That these awliya, these friends of Almighty Allah, for them is glad tidings, good news. Allah will give them good news within this life, this living life, the dunya here, and also the hereafter. Allah will give them good news within this dunya. Allah will fulfill their needs. Allah will fulfill their requirements. And in the day of judgment, Almighty Allah will save them. These are the glad tidings Almighty Allah gives to them. لا تبديل لكلمات الله. Almighty Allah states that the words of Almighty Allah are not to be changed. They are not going to be changed. The fact that the awliya, the friends of Allah, have such great position by Almighty Allah, this is not going to change. ذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. Because they, the awliya, they have achieved the greatest success possible. They have received the highest achievement possible. We as Muslims, we must work and live our lives to reach that level of closeness to Almighty Allah, that Almighty Allah makes us a friend. We can say we are the friend of Almighty Allah, but that is not enough. When Almighty Allah claims us to be a friend and states that this individual is my friend, that is when in reality we are a friend of Almighty Allah. But by achieving that, we must be obedient. And slowly, slowly we will gain that closeness to Almighty Allah. But the awliya Allah, they are those that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned about them on the Day of Judgment. How will they be? The hadith mentioned in Tafsir al-Tabari mentions that inna min ibadillahi ibadan yaghbituhumul anbiya'u wash-shuhada. On the Day of Judgment, from amongst the servants of Almighty Allah, from amongst the people of Almighty Allah, will be those special servants, the awliya. Those special servants, even when the prophets and the martyrs look at their position that Almighty Allah has given to them, they will be shocked, they will be amazed by the position that has been given to them. So the companions, they asked, who are these special people? Man hum ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? فَلَعَلَّنَا نُحِبُّهُمْ. Who are they, O Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, so that we can love them, so we can love these people? The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam replied, hum qawmun tahabbu fillahi min ghayri amwalin wala ansabin wujuhuhum nur ala manabira min nur la yakhafuna idha khafa an-nas wala yahzanuna idha hazina an-nas. That they are those people, those close people of Almighty Allah, that they love one another, they love other people, other Muslims, not because of their wealth, not because of their position, not because of their lineage. They love them purely for the sake of Almighty Allah. They love others purely for the sake of Almighty Allah. They may not have any benefit from that individual, but because that individual is also from amongst the creation of Allah, they love that individual for the sake of Allah. But what will happen? These special people, these awliya, the friends of Allah, on the Day of Judgment, wujuhuhum nur, their faces will be light. They'll be illuminated, full of light. Not only that, when everybody will be standing in front of Almighty Allah, being held accountable, shaking, sweating, to the extent that it will be flooded with the sweat of people. These awliya, these friends of Allah, these people that have gained the closeness to Allah, what will be their position? Ala manabira min nur. Special mimbar, this is a pulpit, a mimbar. Special mimbars of nur will be made for them and placed for them, and upon that pulpit of nur, of light, these awliya will be sitting. They won't be standing with the rest, because they went through that hardship, they dedicated themselves to Almighty Allah. They will have that VIP service provided by Almighty Allah. Those special nur mimbars will be presented, and they will be sitting upon it. La yakhafuna idha khafa an-nas. When the people will be fearing, when the people will fear, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? They will not fear. When the people will grieve, they'll be sad about what they did in the dunya, they will not grieve, because they know they did the maximum that they could do. These are the awliya, the friends of Almighty Allah. A definition that the Prophet ﷺ gave in a hadith mentioned in Tafsir al-Tabari, when the Prophet ﷺ was asked, Man awliya'ullah, who are the friends of Allah? What is a simple definition for the awliya Allah? How do we know if somebody is a wali or not? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied, "Alladhina idha ru'u dhukira Allah." The awliya, they are those that when you see them, you are reminded of Almighty Allah. That this person is close to Allah. This person is a beloved of Almighty Allah. If you get that feeling, then this individual is truly a friend of Almighty Allah. He or she has that closeness to them. But remember, the awliya at one time, now this is going towards the secret world of the awliya. At one time, there is no less than 4,000 awliya in the world. No less than 4,000. From amongst the 4,000 awliya, Almighty Allah selects 300. They are known as akhyar. Akhyar. 300 of them are selected to be part of the spiritual parliament of Almighty Allah. We have the parliament in London. MPs gather representing their constituencies, 650. Almighty Allah has a spiritual parliament of the entire world and the entire multiverse. They are given duties by Almighty Allah, and there is a hierarchy system of those that are in charge, the leader, and then their deputies, and so on and so forth. Each one is given duties. The highest position, who is the leader of all of the awliya that are living, is known as the Ghawth, also known as a Qutb. Two terms refer to the same. Some people think Ghawth and Qutb are separate. No, they are the same term for the same position. The head saint of the entire world is known as the Qutb, also known as the Ghawth. There's only one at one time. When that Ghawth or the Qutb, when he passes away, then what will happen? Another one will replace from the lower ranks. One at each time. Then after the Ghawth, who is in charge to make sure the rest of the 299 within the parliament are doing their work, are doing what Almighty Allah has commanded them to do, he overlooks everything. But below him, he has two deputies. They are known as Imamain, the two Imams. Imamain. These two deputies are there to help the Ghawth, the Qutb. And they could be anywhere in the entire world at each time. Remember, as soon as one passes away, a person from the lower rank will be promoted. And this continues and continues till the day of judgment. The spiritual parliament, which is running from the unseen. This is the secret world of the awliya. So you have the two deputies, the Imamain. You got the Wazirul Yasar, Wazirul Yameen. You got the one Imam, the minister, which is referred to as the left minister, and the one which is referred to as the right minister. The one who is referred to as Wazirul Yameen is of a higher position from amongst those two ministers. Then below them we have the rank known as the Nuqaba. There are three at one time. Three in the entire world. Nuqaba. Then below them we have those that are known as the Awtad. Awtad. And these are four. One in charge of the entire northern area of the world. One in charge of the entire southern area. one in charge of the entire eastern area, one in charge of the entire western area. They have been given that entire area. The north, one. South, east, west. They are in charge of all the affairs that take place. They see what the angels are doing. They see everything that's going on. Almighty Allah has given them the duty to run everything. There are 4 at one time. Below them, below the awtad, we have the next rank, which are the abdal. The abdal are 40 at one time. But between the abdal and between the awtad, we have a rank, a position, which are of 7 awliya. 7 awliya. These 7 awliya are those that each one is given an entire continent to look after. An entire continent they are in charge of. And then below them you have the abdal that are 40. Then below them you have the rank of the nujaba. Nujaba are those that in each major city Almighty Allah has appointed one Najib. Each major city. Coventry has one, in case you're wondering. Birmingham has one. Wolverhampton has one. Leicester has one. Places like Nuneaton, they're too small. So the closest city, major city, is where the Najib will be. So Nuneaton, Hinckley, these small towns, they don't have a special Najib appointed by Almighty Allah. But the Najib is the lowest rank from amongst the spiritual assembly of Almighty Allah, the parliament. One in all the major cities. But the full number of the entire spiritual assembly is 300. It's never more, it's never less. As each person passes away, then based on their rank they get promoted, and the highest will be the Qutab, the Ghawth. But above the Ghawth is one who is known as Al-Ghawth Al-A'zam, Qutb Al-Aqtab, Imam Al-Awliya, Al-Shaykh Abdul Qadir Al-Jilani radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, the great saint who passed away over 850 years ago. He is buried in Iraq, in Baghdad. He is buried there. He has been given the duty that from his time all the way to the day of judgment, each wali that is appointed as a wali, or each wali that is appointed into the spiritual parliament, they are given that position by a Shaykh Abdul Qadir Al-Jilani radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. He has been given that position, Qutb Al-Aqtab, Al-Ghawth Al-A'zam. And on the 11th of this month, meaning today, after Salatul Maghrib, is when this great saint passed away, over 850 years ago. But till the day of judgment, no matter who Almighty Allah blesses with wilayah, with the friendship, with sainthood, they are given the sainthood by Al-Ghawth Al-A'zam, Imam Al-Awliya, Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. You cannot become a wali without being given wilayah from him. This has been set by Almighty Allah. Now a question may be asked, where did this knowledge come from? This knowledge has been presented in Al-Futuhatul Makkiyah by Al-Shaykh Al-Akbar, Shaykh Ibn Arabi rahimahullah ta'ala. The awliya, they wrote books and they presented this information to us. which goes back all the way to the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned about the different positions, like I laid out to you. So that spiritual parliament, they are in charge to make sure everything is functioning properly, to make sure the angels are doing their duties. But the opportunity has been given by Allah just to show the greatness of these awliya, to show the greatness. Because even when they pass away and they are in the grave, Almighty Allah still gives them further duties. Gives them further duties. But this spiritual parliament takes place whilst they are living. But the one that is in charge, Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and that is obviously after he has passed away, he is still continuing this duty. Because this is the highest rank a person can achieve as a wali. Nobody can surpass the one with the highest position from amongst the awliya till the day of judgment, which is of Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani radiyallahu ta'ala an. However, that will come to an end. His duty will come to an end when Imam al-Mahdi comes. Sayyiduna Isa alayhi salam will descend, who the Christians refer to as Jesus. Prophet Jesus, Sayyiduna Isa alayhi salam, will descend again, will come and fight Dajjal. But he is a prophet. Imam Mahdi, he is not a prophet, but he is a wali. So he will be given the duty from that point till the last final stage, where everything will finish. So anybody that becomes a wali at that stage will be given wilaya, sainthood, the closeness to Almighty Allah by Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. This is the spiritual position that Almighty Allah has set for who? The awliya. Remember one thing, a person cannot obtain that position from amongst the 300 except by those that are selected by Allah. You have to be selected by Allah. You cannot just become part of the spiritual parliament. Secondly, you cannot become a wali. Wilaya has to ultimately be approved by Almighty Allah. When Almighty Allah is pleased with a person, He will give them wilaya, He will give them sainthood. But how does sainthood come? Has been mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari, in the Hadith Qudsi, mentioned by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Almighty Allah said that Man aada li waliyan faqad adhantuhu bil harb. One who has enmity, has hatred against my wali, my friend, I will wage war against that individual. This is a position and rank given by Almighty Allah to the awliya, to the friends of Almighty Allah. In the hadith, we don't see Almighty Allah waging war against anybody. In the Quran, we see Almighty Allah waging war against one person only. The one who engages in interest, riba. Almighty Allah states, I will wage war against that individual. And in the entire hadith, we see that the one who has enmity against the awliya, the friends of Allah, Almighty Allah is stating again, I will wage war against those individuals. But the hadith continues that the servant of Allah obtains the closeness to Almighty Allah by acting upon those things which are fard, those things which are compulsory upon us. The salah, the fasting, the zakah, the hajj once in a lifetime, everything which is fard, a person does it and they gain that closeness to Almighty Allah. However, that's not enough. That final part which is needed to truly gain that closeness to Almighty Allah, the hadith mentions, ما يزال عبدي يتقرب إلي بالنوافل حتى أحبه. My servant, he continues to engage in the worship of Allah, in the service of Almighty Allah. He continues to engage in those acts which are optional, nafal. They are not fard. We ask, normally when people ask, is this fard? Is this wajib? No, it's only sunnah. Okay, I don't need to do it. But no, the servant that wants to gain the closeness to Almighty Allah looks. Whatever is sunnah, they will act. Whatever is mustahab, they will act upon it. The nawafil, the optional deeds, they will act upon it. And by acting upon it and acting upon it, they will gain that closeness to Almighty Allah to such an extent that Almighty Allah states, at that stage, I will love my servant. I will love my servant. But not only that. فَإِذَا أَحْبَبْتُهُ كُنْتُ سَمْعَهُ الَّذِي يَسْمَعُ بِهِ وَبَصَرَهُ الَّذِي يُبْصِرُ بِهَا. That a person will continue to gain such closeness to Almighty Allah. Almighty Allah states that that person will ultimately be given that close position, that when that individual hears, in reality he will have the power of the hearing of Almighty Allah. Allah will give that special power to him, that when he hears, in reality it is Almighty Allah that is hearing. وَبَصَرَهُ الَّذِي يُبْصِرُ بِهِ. And when he sees, the sight will be such that when he sees, in reality it will be the sight that has been given by Almighty Allah. The sight of Allah has no limit. Even though the wali is seeing, but in reality it is Almighty Allah that is seeing. That is a power that has been bestowed upon the individual. But not only that, وَيَدَهُ الَّتِي يَبْطِشُ بِهَا. When the wali, when the saint uses his hand for something, in reality it will be the power of Almighty Allah, the grip of Almighty Allah. Likewise, وَرِجْلَهُ الَّتِي يَمْشِي بِهَا. And the wali, when he walks, when he uses his legs, in reality it will be with the power of Almighty Allah. In another hadith, the wording as mentioned in Fathul Bari by Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he mentions another wording of this in another narration. وَلِسَانَهُ الَّذِي يَتَكَلَّمُ بِهِ. That Almighty Allah will become the tongue with which the wali will speak. That he is speaking, but in reality it is the speech of Almighty Allah. But then what will happen? وَإِن سَأَلَنِي لَأُعْطِيَنَّ وَلَئِنِ اسْتَعَاذَنِي لَأُعِيذَنَّ. When the servant will ask me for something, I will give it to him. When he seeks my protection, I will provide him that protection. These are the awliyaullah, the friends of Almighty Allah. As Muslims, what do? We love the awliyaullah. As Muslims, what do? We work to gain that closeness to Almighty Allah, that one day if we are worthy, maybe Almighty Allah turns us into His friend. When we see certain people in society, especially with the youngsters in school, you have the most popular kid in school, you're like, I want to be his friend. In society, somebody with great respect and honor, you want to have that closeness with them. Imagine the closeness with the Creator Himself. The closeness with the Creator Himself, Almighty Allah. This is what our mission should be, to gain that closeness to Almighty Allah. And the only way we will gain that closeness is if we have true Iman and have true taqwa. When we live our lives, we must make sure we don't do anything which will displease Almighty Allah. I conclude on the statement of Sayyidina Ubay ibn Ka'b. He was asked by Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, a great companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He asked another great companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, known as Sayyidina Ubay ibn Ka'b. He asked him that, "Mat taqwa? What is taqwa?" In simple terms, we have these technical definitions that have been given. But if you were to explain taqwa, how would you explain taqwa? Sayyidina Ubay radiallahu ta'ala anhu, this has been mentioned in Tafsir al-Tabari. Under Ala inna awliya Allahi, under that tafsir, you will find these statements. The reason why I give references in case somebody wants to check. So, he asked him, "Ma taqwa, what is taqwa?" Sayyidina Ubay radiallahu ta'ala anhu said to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, "Hal akhafta tariqan dha shawk?" Have you ever traveled on a path, walked on a path full of thorns? You seen what thorns do? They will cut you, rip your clothes. They will hurt you. Thorns, stinging nettles, thorns. هل أخذت طريقا ذا شوك? Have you ever traveled on a path which had thorns? Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu replied, "Na'am, yes, I have." Sayyidina Ubay radiallahu ta'ala anhu then said, "فما عملت فيه?" What did you do when you walked? He replied, "تشمرت وحذرت." That when I walked, because there were thorns everywhere, I gathered my clothes together and I walked very carefully so that I don't hurt myself. Sayyidina Ubay ibn Ka'b radiyallahu ta'ala anhu replied, فَذَاكَ التَّقْوَى, that is taqwa. That you travel on this path of earth, this life that Almighty Allah has given us. When we are walking on this path, to walk with such carefulness, with such precaution, with such safety, with such safeguarding, that we don't hurt our iman, that we don't hurt our akhirah, that we don't destroy our opportunity to enter paradise. To walk with this fear, with this precaution in this life, and to live life like this in reality is taqwa. May Almighty Allah give us all the ability to die with iman. May Allah give us all the ability to obtain the highest level of taqwa. And if it is in our destiny, may Almighty Allah also make us from amongst the awliya. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينَ.